National University's report looks at the potential financial risk and gains if this year's predicted El Niño brings record-setting rain. Joining me with the findings and possible next steps are senior policy analyst Vince Vasquez with National University's Institute for Policy Research and Courtney Pendleton with the American Red Cross of San Diego and Imperial counties. And Vince, what parts of San Diego's economy would be hardest hit if we got this record-setting rain?
Right, so we actually did a literature review on the issue of El Niños and the economy. We found that in fact the agriculture and tourism are probably the most likely to be impacted. Obviously it depends on sort of the severity of storms this coming year, but it's clear that in prior years there's been a drop in visitor attendance at Disney World as well as SeaWorld. And there's been crop damage and a lot of issues with regards to pests and root rot when it comes to agriculture. So it remains to be seen what happens, but ultimately these are the two areas that we would consider to be priorities.
In these projections in your report, what were they based on?
So what we went ahead and did is we found what's called 100-year flood zones, and that's FEMA's determination for insurance purposes. Areas that have 1% more or chance of a flood happening in any given year. And we went ahead and got census data from 2000, 2010. We also got county and business and housing data. What we found was, in fact, there was 55,000 people who live in what's known as these 100-year flood zones.
55,000 people in San Diego County.
Countywide.
I see. Well, even with a little bit of rain, we all know Mission Valley floods, of course. We see it. We see cars washing down there often. But what are some of the other areas throughout San Diego County that might be at risk? I
think people would be surprised to learn that, in fact, there's a large number of urban areas, so places like Stockton, Logan Heights, San Marcos, Oceanside. And we were surprised because I think a lot of that attention is on Mission Valley, the Tijuana River Valley, Mission Beach and Mission Bay, but in fact that there's a lot of small pockets where they're really at risk, and it's a matter of sort of learning more about whether you are or not. You can get ahead of that.
And Courtney, I know National University's report included it is the number of deaths from that were related to El Niño storms in the past. How is the Red Cross preparing to help if these storms actually get that bad?
Absolutely. Well, we're the humanitarian organization, right? It's about helping the people who might be affected by something like El Niño. And there's so many layers for us that at the Red Cross that we're doing, but really, I mean, El Niño is just like any other disaster that we'd be preparing for. But we use things like the data that Vince's report has shown us, and as well as working with our county Office of Emergency Services partners to really even look at our data and where we have shelters, for instance, and partner agreements with those shelters. And if they do fall in those specific flood zones and floodplains that have been identified as a risk, we're certainly going to be looking to see where else we're going to be able to open shelters. And the list goes on from there.
And what about with the city? Is the Red Cross coordinating with the city and the county?
We're always working with all of our city and county partners on things like this. You know, and again, it's for any disaster. It actually doesn't, a lot of the preparedness that goes into place isn't necessarily disaster specific, right, for these things. But for the flooding side, there's so much more that individuals can do to get prepared ahead of time. And again, it goes with any sort of disaster that can, in theory, happen. But we want people to get a kit, make a plan, and get informed. So reading, you know, the data that Vince has in this study and really getting prepared, so if they need to evacuate, they'd be ready.
Sure, and Vince, part of this report, it's just not all bad news. You actually found some economic benefits from a strong El Niño.
Right, so again, from that literature review, on the national level, there's actually a small economic benefit anytime there's a El Niño event. The reason being is that areas that otherwise would be having blizzards and snowstorms typically will have a more milder, warmer winter, places like the East Coast and the Midwest. And so as a result, they have clearer roads, there's less delays in terms of transit and goods, and there's more people spending money. They're going out into the economy instead of hibernating at home in really bad weather.
All right, Vince Vasquez and Courtney Pendleton, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.